Italian shoe industry is very well known all over the world, but who have ever imagined that a shoe would have become the symbol of the spat between Rome and Brussels? Do you remember this? In October, an Italian member of the European Parliament stamped his Made in Italy shoe on Commissioner Moscovici's speech that was criticizing Italy's draft budget. This MEP said that Italy deserves respect and these Eurodoms must understand it. How did we get there? Here's a little reminder of how Rome versus Brussels panned out during 2018. It all began in June when the new populist government got into power. The two coalition parties, the anti-establishment Five Star Movement and the far-right The League, often accused the EU of having hammered Italy with austerity and during their electoral campaign promised less taxes, a minimum basic income and an early retirement scheme. But when they had to submit the draft budget for 2019, the government promises crashed with reality. The European Commission wanted Italy to respect fiscal rules, reduce its public debt, and setting a budget deficit at 1.8% of the GDP. While Italy presented a budget draft that was setting the budget deficit at 2.4% of the GDP. Rome believed that its expansive economic policy would have boosted the economic growth, while the European Commission affirmed that it would only have increased the public debt. Yes, because this budget plan was allocating 37 billion euros, out of which 22 would be financed by borrowing money from the financial markets. After Greece, Italy has the highest debt in Europe and is the third largest economy in the Eurozone. Economists agree that the risk of its debt becoming unsustainable was a threat for all the Eurozone, France the most exposed to collateral damage.
French banks have got a lot of Italian debt and the French economy relies a lot on the Italian economy. So if something goes wrong in the Italian economy, either in the markets or because the debt is not complying with rules, that could really hurt France.
But when confronted with warrants from Brussels, the Italian Vice Prime Minister Matteo Salvini fired many times on the so-called EU bureaucrats. The enemies of Europe are those sealed in the bunker of Brussels. It's Juncker and Moscovici who have caused fear and job insecurity in Europe. As Italy remained firm on its stance, in November the European Commission said that the budget draft was in serious non-compliance with EU fiscal rules and warrant for the opening of the procedure for excessive debt. Have a listen to the concerns of the European Commissioner for Economic Affairs, Pier Moscovici.
Who will pay the bill for this extra spending? We continue to believe that this budget carries risks for Italy's economy, for its companies, for its savers, and for its taxpayers.
That move was intended to put pressure on Italy to climb down. If taken to the limit, this process could have led to the imposition of fines on Italy, a punishment unprecedented in the euro's 20-year life. But when asked to reply to the letter of the Commission, the Italian Vice Prime Minister Salvini boldly said, "I was also waiting for Santa Claus letter. We will discuss politely, as we have always done, but we will go on." Well, in the meanwhile, the big spending budget plan had sent interest rates up, and other European leaders warned Italy to change its mind. Confronted with the gravity of the situation, Rome toned down its rhetoric with Brussels by proposing to reduce the deficit at 2.04% of the GDP. But it was not enough. After days of exhausting negotiations, on the 19th of December a compromise was reached. Italy recognized that its plan was not able to boost the economy as much as foreseen and gave the Commission further guarantees on its structural deficit. The compromise arrived just in time for Christmas, but this year the panettone has a bitter taste. For now, the country avoided to face the painful consequences of a disciplinary measure, but we remain under the monitoring of the European Commission. If Rome fails to respect its engagement, the nightmare of an infringement procedure could return.